The mysterious disappearance of 19-year-old Brandon Swanson is one that has baffled investigators and his family for over 15 years. Brandon Swanson was enrolled in the wind turbine program at West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota. May 13, 2008 was the last day of classes, and Brandon decided to celebrate by spending the evening at his friend's house in Lind, Minnesota, which is about 40 minutes southeast of Canby. There, Brandon hung out with some friends and had a few drinks. Shortly after midnight on May 14, 2008, Brandon decided to head out and drive back to his parents' house in Marshall, Minnesota, about 10 minutes away northeast of Lind, Minnesota. At around 12:30 a.m., Brandon had some type of accident while driving and ended up driving his car into a roadside ditch. He promptly called his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, asking them to pick him up from the location of the accident. According to the parents, he sounded certain of his location and did not seem too disoriented, so they left the house and drove towards Lind in hopes of quickly finding Brandon. As they neared what they thought would be the accident location, Brandon's parents began flashing their headlights on and off and instructed Brandon to also do the same so they could easily identify him while driving. To each of their surprise, they were not able to see each other's headlights, and this caused Brandon and his parents to begin arguing after mounting frustration. Brandon ended up hanging up on his mother. She then called him back to apologize, only for Brandon to tell her that he was just going to walk back to his friend's house and would wait for them there. Brian and Annette decided to drive back to their home in Marshall to drop off Annette so she could go back to bed. With Brandon still on the phone, Brian Swanson drove back towards Lind to once again try and locate Brandon, who was walking back towards town. Brandon did the best he could, explaining to his father his surroundings, at one point stating that he was walking along a fence line and could also see lights of the town in the distance. The two were still unable to locate one another. At 3:10 a.m., Brandon suddenly shouted, "Oh, shit!" and the call ended abruptly. Brian Swanson was unsuccessful in finding his son that faithful morning. Brandon Swanson has never been seen alive again. Brian attempted to call his son back several times, but Brandon never answered again. He called his friends to see if they had heard from Brandon recently, but no one knew where he was. After a few more hours of searching to no avail, Brandon's mother, Annette, decided to call the Lyon County Sheriff's Department at 6:30 a.m. to report him missing. As with most missing adult cases, at first authorities were somewhat reluctant to search for Brandon because he was legally an adult, and it wasn't unusual for adults to be out all night or take some time to themselves. After realizing the seriousness of the situation, they joined the search later that morning. That afternoon, on May 14, 2008, authorities located Brandon's Chevy Lumina in a rural area near a field approach on Highway 68. The car was located just outside the small towns of Porter and Taunton, Minnesota, located 20 miles northwest of Marshall, where his parents live, and about 25 miles from Lind, where he thought he was outside of. There was no significant trace evidence found, no signs of blood, no signs of a struggle, and no illegal drugs or alcohol were found. Teams with search dogs were deployed and led authorities to the banks of the Yellow Medicine River. However, the search of the river was eventually ruled out, because if Brandon did fall in the river, his body would have been washed downriver and eventually found. Numerous searches have been conducted since Brandon's disappearance, but no body or physical evidence has ever been found. Search manager Jeff Hass, who runs a blog on Brandon's search, has said that he believes Brandon's remains will be found in time due to cadaver dogs indicating scents in some areas. After years of hope, Brandon's family and authorities have been left with a lot more questions than answers. In a 2015 interview, Brandon's mother stated that she thinks that her son is not alive, saying that she felt shortly after the first 24 hours were up that something terribly wrong happened. Until Brandon or his body is found, authorities and internet sleuths will have their own theories of what happened to Brandon. Mental breakdown, suicide, accident, homicide, and him leaving voluntarily to start a new life have all been talked about and investigated. But so far, there has been no evidence of any of them. Brian and Annette Swanson always remembered the nonchalant attitude they received from law enforcement when they first reported Brandon missing. They became advocates and lobbied for the passing of what would become Brandon's Law, which requires law enforcement to immediately begin a preliminary investigation without delay when an adult goes missing under dangerous circumstances, regardless of their age. If you or anyone you know have any information on the disappearance of Brandon Swanson, don't hesitate to call 911 or the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office in Minnesota.